They say that the greatest tragedies are not those that strike us like thunderbolts, but those that unfold silently across years until one day we wake up and realize we have been living a lie. Leo Tolstoy, one of the greatest writers to have ever lived, spent his life wrestling with this truth. He had wealth, fame, a loving family, and literary genius beyond measure. But at the peak of his success, he found himself standing at the edge of an abyss, staring into the meaninglessness of existence. And so he did what few dare to do. He burned the life he knew to the ground, renounced his past, and set out to uncover the deepest truths of the human soul. What if everything you've been taught about happiness, love, and success is a deception? What if the answers you seek cannot be found in the world, but only within yourself? This was Tolstoy's struggle, and his search for meaning became a blueprint for the rest of humanity. Leo Tolstoy was not born into suffering. He was not a man shaped by hardship, but by privilege. Born in 1828 into an aristocratic Russian family, he had everything a person could want. Estates, money, an education, a name that commanded respect. Yet even as a young man, he was restless, chasing pleasure, drowning in excess, searching for something he couldn't name. His early years were filled with contradictions. He gambled away fortunes, joined the military seeking glory, and indulged in hedonistic pleasures. But behind it all, he was a thinker. A man who could not look at the world without questioning its foundations. His journals from his youth reveal a mind tormented by the fleeting nature of pleasure and the inevitability of death. He could not ignore what so many people spend their lives avoiding, the question of what it all means. And so he turned to literature. Writing became his refuge, his means of making sense of the chaos of existence. And with his pen, he changed the world. At first, Tolstoy wrote stories of war and history, capturing the grandeur and brutality of life. His masterpiece, War and Peace, is not just a novel, it is a meditation on fate, free will, and the forces that shape human lives. In it, he does something no other writer had done before. He dissolves the illusion of individual greatness. He shows that history is not made by kings and generals, but by the millions of invisible moments, choices, and coincidences that shape the world. Are we truly free, or are we just pieces in a game played by forces beyond our understanding? Tolstoy forces us to confront this question, not with abstract philosophy, but with the raw, lived experience of his characters. The grand battles of history are not seen through the eyes of rulers, but through the ordinary soldiers who tremble in the cold, through the young men who go to war dreaming of glory and find only terror. He strips away the illusions that people construct about history, about power, about the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of chaos. But even as War and Peace cemented his reputation as the greatest writer of his time, Tolstoy was not satisfied. He felt he had only scratched the surface of something deeper, and so he turned inward. If War and Peace was about history, Anna Karenina was about the human soul. At its heart, Anna Karenina is a novel about deception, the lies we tell others, the lies we tell ourselves. It is about the illusions of love, the way passion can lead to ruin, and the unbearable weight of living a life that is not truly yours. Anna's story is not just about adultery. It is about the conflict between societal expectations and inner truth. It is about the masks we wear, the way we perform happiness while secretly dying inside. Her tragedy is not just that she is destroyed by love, but that she is trapped in a world that does not allow her to be free. Tolstoy presents two paths in Anna Karenina. Anna's path, a descent into suffering, and Levin's path, a search for meaning beyond personal desire. Levin, in many ways, is Tolstoy himself, a man disillusioned by society, longing for a simpler, more authentic existence. His journey mirrors Tolstoy's own shift from seeking happiness in external things to searching for a deeper, more spiritual fulfillment. But Tolstoy's true awakening did not come through fiction. It came through a crisis that nearly drove him to take his own life. Imagine this. You have achieved everything you ever wanted. You are celebrated as a genius. You are wealthy beyond imagination. You have a loving family, land, power, admiration. And yet, you wake up every morning with the unbearable weight of a single thought. None of it matters. This was Tolstoy's crisis. He found himself consumed by the question, what is the purpose of life? And when he could not find an answer, he became obsessed with death. He saw that everything he had worked for would one day turn to dust, that every pleasure, every achievement would vanish. He was haunted by the idea that his entire existence had been a deception, and he was not alone in this realization. He saw that most people were living in a kind of sleep, distracting themselves with ambition, love, and entertainment to avoid facing the terrifying truth of their own mortality. In his confession, he writes, "Is there any meaning in my life that the inevitable death awaiting me does not destroy?" For years, he teetered on the edge of despair. But then, something changed. He turned not to philosophy, not to literature, but to the simplest people, the peasants who worked the land. He saw in them a kind of wisdom he had never encountered before. They were not tormented by existential questions. They did not fear death in the way he did. They lived with faith, with simplicity, with a quiet understanding of life's mysteries. And so, Tolstoy did what few could imagine. He renounced his wealth. He rejected his aristocratic status. He abandoned his previous works and declared that literature, as he had known it, was a lie. He devoted himself to a new kind of writing, one that was not meant to entertain, but to awaken. From this point on, Tolstoy's work was no longer about grand narratives. It was about truth. He wrote essays condemning the church, the state, and the illusions of modern civilization. He became an advocate for non-violence, simplicity, and moral purity. His ideas would later inspire Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and countless others seeking a higher path. But perhaps his most profound work in this period was The Death of Ivan Ilyich. It is a short novel, but in its pages, Tolstoy distills his entire philosophy. It tells the story of a man who has lived his life according to society's expectations, chasing status, wealth, comfort, and then he falls ill. Slowly, painfully, he realizes that his entire existence has been empty. He has never truly lived, only performed the role of a successful man. And as death approaches, he is forced to confront the unbearable truth. He does not know who he is. It is a story about all of us, about the way we avoid thinking about death, about how we convince ourselves that we have time, until one day we don't. Tolstoy's message was clear. To truly live, we must strip away every illusion. We must reject the false promises of happiness sold to us by society. We must look death in the face and not turn away. In his final years, Tolstoy became a living embodiment of his philosophy. He dressed in simple clothes, worked alongside peasants, and sought a life of spiritual purity. But his radical transformation came at a cost. His family, particularly his wife, struggled to accept his rejection of wealth and status. His home became a battleground between his ideals and the world he had once belonged to. And so, in the middle of winter, at the age of 82, Tolstoy did something unthinkable. He walked away from everything, his estate, his family, his comforts, and set off on a journey with no destination. Days later, he was found in a remote train station, dying of pneumonia. Even in death, he remained true to his path. A man who had spent his life searching for truth, even when it led him away from everything he had ever known. And perhaps that is Tolstoy's final lesson. To seek truth is to walk alone. But to walk alone, if it is towards truth, is the only path worth taking.